Let me share with you an ad that was in the London newspapers of 1900. It was not written by a Madison Avenue firm. It wasn't written by a wordsmith. It wasn't written by a spin master. The ad was written by someone who had a particular need. Here's the ad. It said, "Men wanted for hazardous journey. Small wages, bitter cold, long months of complete darkness, constant danger, safe return doubtful, honor and recognition in case of success." It was signed by Ernest Shackleton, polar explorer. Now, today, you'd never put an ad like that in a newspaper. See, too many people would have their input. They want to make sure it was massaged correctly, that the words were exactly right. Well, let me tell you what happened with that ad. Anybody want to guess what happened with that ad? Would you answer that ad? Well, here's,
being a man, no.
Here's what happened. In speaking of the ad later, Shackleton said, "It seemed as though all the men in Great Britain were determined to accompany me. The response was so overwhelming." You see, one thing we demand in communications is honesty. Words have meaning. Every word has a specific meaning. And every time we try to massage those words to try to say what is correct and not what should be said, we're not really talking to people. We're talking at people. You know, as a trainer, as a consultant, I'm in a lot of organizations, and sometimes you go in and you can feel what that organization is like. You can cut it with a knife. You walk in and the culture of that organization just jumps out at you. So I've got some observations I want to share with you. Here's the first observation. The person at the top of the organization sets the tone for the way in which the entire organization functions. You can feel the thumbprint of that person at the top as soon as you walk in the door. There is no doubt about it. The way that person thinks, the way that person feels, the way that person deals with other individuals is thick. You can grasp it. You, as a leader and a manager, put your imprint on everything in an organization. You cannot lock yourself in a room or in a closet or anywhere you want to lock yourself and have no impact. That's why major league teams change managers. That's why football teams change coaches. That's why companies like Enron have had problems. Another observation. Someone within the organization has the solution to every perceived problem of the organization. You know, as a consultant, it's kind of interesting. You can walk into a place, to a business organization, and you can get the answer very quickly. You know how you get the answer? You ask the person who knows. And sometimes that person has been working there for 20 years, sitting back in a corner, and nobody has ever talked to them. And they know the answer. But nobody's ever asked them. See, that's what communications is all about. You, as a leader, have got to establish that channel of communications so that you ask that person. See, it's a lot cheaper and a lot easier to do that. Another observation goes like this. An organization's work distribution and communication channels adapt to the individuals who join and leave the organization. Anybody here in human resources? Anybody who is, please put your hands like this for the next minute. Because you're not going to like what I have to say. You see, I was in the corporate world for a long time, and every so often, a company says, we're going to do something to become more effective, more efficient, to compete in the marketplace. We're going to implement job descriptions. So for the next 6 months, everybody in the organization fills out questionnaires, and they check little blocks, and they turn them in, and they compile them. And lo and behold, after 12 months, you have a description of every person who ever worked in that organization at that moment when the job description started. But you see, I equate this to what I call the racehorse theory. You see, we didn't know until photography was invented that at some point when that racehorse is running around the track, that all 4 legs are off the ground. And you can take a picture of a racehorse, and at some point it will not be touching the ground. What if that racehorse were a company? And what if we did job descriptions at the moment all 4 of those legs were off the ground? could we not then assume that race horses and your company can fly? Because at that particular point, that's what it is doing. But yet, we live with those job descriptions for a long time after we do them. I know, as a manager, I was never able to replace one person with another. No two people are exactly alike. When one person left my department, I would fill the position, but the person who came in was different. Different skills, different background, and guess what I did? I took all of those things that I had to get done, and I redistributed them. I gave them to different people. Because the person who came in could do something different than the person who left. You see, that's how organizations function. Organizations are living, breathing entities. Just like all of you in this room, there are no two of you alike. There are no two organizations alike. They're constantly growing. The restrictions of a job description prevent growth. They don't help it. I want you to ask yourself a couple of questions. Because every organization has profound truths. You see, you walk in the door and you are told, we've always done it this way because this is the way it is done. And we know it's the way that it's done because we've always done it this way, and we wouldn't have been doing it this way if it isn't the way to do it. These are sacred cows. These are things you're not allowed to touch because we know that these are true. Ask yourselves these questions. Why was this procedure designed to work the way it does? And what prevents it from being changed? I'll give you a real-life example. I will not mention the name of the company because it is a company from this area, and if I mentioned the name, you would understand who the company was. But I went in on a consulting project one time, and I was tracking down the 5 copies of a form. You know, you got your basic blue copy and your pink copy and your gold copy and, well, you know, all the different colors of copies. So I decided to find out what was on those forms and who was using them. Well, the first 4 were pretty easy. The 5th one, though, was ripped off, put in a stack, put in an outbox. Once a day, somebody came to the outbox and took those blue forms to somebody else, who then checked off to make sure all the numbers were sequential. We have to make sure numbers are sequential. That's profound truth, by the way. Numbers are always sequential. They were put in a box. After the numbers were sequentially checked off, someone else came and got the forms, took them over to another secretary, who made sure that the first number check was accurate because we wanted to make sure that the person who checked the numbers at the beginning didn't miss something. The forms were then picked up again, taken over to another department, and I watched as those forms were put into a filing cabinet. The drawers were opened, and the drawers were full of pink and blue forms. Because somebody 20 years ago used to use that blue form. Guess what? They left. Now nobody used that form, but we still have it, and it's still on file. Why do we do things? Do we do them because we've always done them? And if that's our rationale for doing something, why can't we change it? See, change is one of those things that we talk about a lot. New ideas frequently produce resistance. People don't like to change. We have pathways in our heads. We follow them constantly. We've done it again and again and again. When we veer from that, it's difficult. It's painful. But see, resistance comes from several things. One is loss of control. We as human beings like to be in control of our environment. When we are not in control, we start to resist. We don't like to change. When that blue form is no longer put in that drawer, I don't feel in control. Part of my job is gone. I was picking up that blue form. It's no longer there. I've lost some control of my environment. Lack of information. We as human beings do not like to change unless we know why. And sometimes some of those executives issue edicts. Do it because I said do it. This is a real statement from an executive that I worked with. The company was in a period of change. They were implementing a new system. To start the session off, he got up in front of the room and said this, word for word, "We didn't want to tell you about the changes because we didn't want rumors to start." I hope you find that as amusing as I do, because when do rumors start? When we don't have information. You see, a lack of information produces resistance. We don't want to change. Finally, events and decisions which seem meaningless. Now, sometimes they aren't meaningless. See, because if I am a manager or an executive or one of those people that made the decision, I know why we're doing this. But maybe we should tell somebody? Maybe we should let people know? Because people will resist the things that seem meaningless. You see, I spent 3 years of my life in the United States Army. And there was that old stereotype which said, one day you dig a foxhole, and the next day, because you have nothing else to do, you fill it in. It is meaningless. And when we do things that are meaningless, we resist. We don't like meaningless work. Resistance results in several things. Here's what it results in. First of all, we fight it. We don't like to do it. We will fight. We'll get up and we will try to stop it because it's not comfortable. We can also get away from it. We can fly. We can get out of there. Go someplace else. Do something else. That's also painful. That's a change. The third thing, though, is called sabotage. Sometimes the roots of words tell us more than the word itself. There's a wooden shoe up there. During the Industrial Revolution in France, the peasants from the countryside found new jobs in the cities. It was the Industrial Revolution. They came into the factories. Well, peasants did not have leather shoes. They were too expensive. They had wooden shoes. They would go into the factories to work. And if you remember the old factories, some of you might remember, maybe not. They had big gears, big teeth in those gears. And the gears would crunch together to run everything. Well, you see, the peasants, who are now industrial workers, when they did not want to work, they would take off their wooden shoes, which were, by the way, called sabots. And they would throw them in the gears. And they would sabotage the gears. And with wooden shoes in the gears, work stopped. And when you have resistance, work stops. Managers contribute to it through something that I call the "I knew it wouldn't work" philosophy. How many times have you gone into an organization? How many times have you been in an organization when you hear a manager or a supervisor or somebody higher up say, "Hey, you know, I knew it wouldn't work. They asked me and I told them, I know it wouldn't work." You know what that means? That manager is taking off that sabot and throwing it in the gears. They are sabotaging the entire operation. Change is difficult. I live in that great dairy state of Wisconsin. License plates say America's Dairyland. About the turn of that same century where that ad came from, 1900, there was a lyricist named Sam Voss. Sam was wandering through the fields. He saw a newborn calf. And in case you have not seen a newborn calf, let me describe a newborn calf to you. A newborn calf has a small body, long legs. It does not walk a straight path. It walks a crooked path. Sam saw this. He was moved to write a verse. That verse is called the calf path. It goes like this. One day, through the primeval wood, a calf walked home as good calves should, but made a trail all bent askew, a crooked trail, as all calves do. That trail was taken up the next day by a dog that passed along the way. And then a wise bellwether sheep pursued that trail o'er vale and steep and drew the flock behind him too, as good bellwethers always do. And from that day o'er hill and glade and through those old woods a path was made. And many men wound in and out and dodged and turned and bent about and uttered words of righteous wrath because 'twas such a crooked path. but still they followed. Do not laugh. The first migrations of that calf. The years went by in swiftness, fleet. That path became a village street. And this, before men were aware, a city's crowded thoroughfare. Each day 100,000 route trailed that zigzag calf about, and o'er his crooked journey went the traffic of a continent. 100,000 men are led by one calf near, 2 centuries dead. A moral lesson this might teach, were I ordained and called to preach. For men are prone to go it blind along the calf paths of their mind. They work away from sun to do what other men have done. They follow in the beaten track and out and in and forth and back, and still their devious course pursue to keep the path that others do. But how the wise old wood gods laugh who saw that first primeval calf. When you leave here today, there is something you are no longer allowed to say. Those words are, I can't do that because I've never done it that way before. Thank you for being here. I've enjoyed being with you today.